Hey there coders, this program is called LeapFrog, so this should be the fifth one for the lower grade coding contest. If you skipped ahead and didn't do the previous four, this one might be a little tricky because it's the most complicated one we've done so far, and it builds off some of the things that we've done in the previous four lessons. I think you'll see what I mean. So for this one, we want to make a game called LeapFrog, where we have something that moves across the screen, and a frog that reacts to a button. So when you push the space bar, the frog will jump, and the point is to avoid the thing that's moving around the screen. So this program is going to use a loop. It's going to use sense. No, it's not going to use sensing. It's going to use a loop. It's going to use input. It's going to use events and motion and animation. Forgot that one. Okay, so here we go. We want our frog. Well, actually it's a toad, but we're going to call it a frog. We're going to have this be a magical toad that's jumping in a castle. I didn't tell you what I did there. So watch this. I went to choose a backdrop and I just picked this one, Castle 3. So there's our backdrop, Castle 3. We're going to add two sprites for this one. One's the frog, and the other one's going to be the one that moves back and forth. So let's click on choose a sprite. This one's called Wizard Toad, so it's way down in the W's. Wizard Toad. And you can see if you look at the costumes for this sprite that there's two. And if you switch back and forth, then that kind of helps the animation go. Well, that's what makes it look like it's jumping. Okay, let's do our code for the frog first of all. Right, here's something we haven't talked about before. When you've clicked on your sprite, this X and Y tells you where it is on the screen. X is left and right, so you can see over here the X goes up. In the middle it's close to 0. And way over here it's actually a negative number. And this second number right here is your Y's. That keeps track of how high you are. So way at the top, that's a high number. In the middle it's close to 0. And down at the bottom, then it's a negative number too. So that's important to know. You don't have to really have a strong understanding about that yet right now because the program will kind of keep track of where you're at as well. Here's what I want to do with this one. Let's have this guy start at 0 and negative 115. Alright, that's where he is right now. We'll just leave him there, try not to move him around too much. And we're going to use an event. The event we're going to use for the frog, and think about this, when we push a button we want the frog to do something, specifically jump. This command right here, when space is pressed, is the one we want to use. Now you could change this if you wanted it to be the up arrow instead of the space bar. You could change that or any of the other buttons on the keyboard. We're going to leave it as space though. Okay, so think about this for a second. When we push the space bar, we want the frog to move and look like it's jumping. So here's a motion thing that we haven't used yet before. This one that says glide. And there's two glide ones. There's glide 1 second to a random position. There's glide 1 second to a specific position. This is the one we want today. Now think about it. If we want the frog to jump, it needs to do two things. It needs to go up, and then it also needs to go down. So bring over another one of these because we're going to use two different glide commands for this one. Right now they're exactly the same though, 0, negative 115. If we wanted the frog to go to the top of the screen, you see its X value over, or its Y value here changes to 140. All we need to do is change this number right here. So on the top one, change that to, let's just make it positive 115. Okay, so put him down low. And watch what happens when I hit the space bar. Well, before I hit the space bar, think about what's going to happen. It's going to glide for 1 second to 0, 115. And then glide 1 second to 0, negative 115. It's at about 0, negative 115 right now. But when you hit the space bar, it's going to go through these two things, and you'll see it go up and then down. That's a pretty good looking jump for a frog. Now, it doesn't look like it's jumping. So how would we change the costumes? Could you think about that for a second? We want to change the way it looks, so come click on Looks. And it only has two costumes, so an easy way to do this would just be to use this Next Costume button. Now, so if I put this here, before it starts moving, it's going to switch costumes. Watch what happens. So there's its jump. Huh. Does that look right, having it still look like it's jumping? It really doesn't look right. We probably ought to switch back. So, because there's only 2 costumes, if we put this at the end, it'll switch back to the first one. So watch what happens now when I hit the spacebar. It's backwards though. If you disconnect this real quick and just click on it, that is a quick way to make it change costumes. Hit spacebar, it glides and jumps. Glides and jumps. Glides and jumps. Okay, you'll notice this 1 second is a number we can change. If I change that to 3, what do you think would happen? Will it go faster or slower? If you said slower, you're right, watch. Because it goes the same distance, but now it takes 3 seconds to get there. You know there's numbers smaller than 1. If I did half of 1, we call that a decimal, 0.5, it should go a lot faster. Watch this. Whoop. That's pretty good. I'm going to switch it back to 1. We're going to leave these numbers alone, but I'll show you real quick if you were curious. The x0 is right in the middle of the screen. If I change that to, say, 100, do you think it's going to go straight up and down? Or do you think it'll go left or to the right? If you said to the right, you're correct. Watch the spacebar. But that, in my mind, looks a little silly because it doesn't make sense for him to be moving backwards on the way back down. So I'm going to switch that back to 0, but you can see what that means. Okay, the frog script is basically done. All we need to add now is what is this frog going to jump over? Well, I want him to jump over a ball, so choose a sprite. Here's the ball. You'll notice it has different colors as its costumes. Let's pick a different one here. Maybe he wants to avoid a green ball. I'm going to put it on the ground here. Go back to code. Okay, think for a second. How can we get the ball to go back and forth here so the frog jumps over it? Well, this one we want to attach to a flag so that it starts moving when the program runs. So go to events, drag over when green flag is clicked, and we're going to need motion on this, but how many times do we want the ball to move back and forth? Makes sense that we want it to keep going as long as the program is running. So that is a control. And which of these would do that? Hopefully you said forever loop. The forever loop means whatever's in here is going to keep happening as long as the program is running, and that's exactly what we want the ball to do. We're almost done with the ball, so now we just need to tell it to move. Here's the motion section, move 10 steps. And the last thing we want, you should remember this from the previous program, is this code right here that says if on edge bounce. Now think about that. This ball, forever, is going to move 10, and then if it hits the edge, it's going to bounce. So we should see it changing directions as it hits the edge back and forth. So let's hit the green flag and watch the ball. You'll notice the frog doesn't do anything because the frog's code only responds to a spacebar input. So if I hit the spacebar, I can make the frog jump over the ball. Okay, boys and girls, that's about it for our program. Some of the things you may want to fiddle with on this one to make it better. Maybe you want to change the speed of the ball. Is it by making the number smaller, it makes the ball slower? Is that easier? I think that kind of makes more sense. So your frog can jump without landing on the ball halfway on the way back down. Okay, so there's our program called LeapFrog. I should probably put the name here. LeapFrog. Even though it's a toad, we're going to call it that. And ways you could change this up a little bit. Well, you could do what we did with the space chase. Maybe you could have something happens if he touches the ball. Maybe you could have 2 balls coming in. Maybe you could change the speed each time it touched. Maybe you could have the frog looking at the ball somehow. I give those challenges to you. See what you can do with it, and good luck.